All right, we're going to get going here on what I'm sure is going to be the hottest topic here, flame weeding. So we've got a bit of a dual session here. We've got some PhD researchers up from Nebraska to talk about the research of flame weeding, and then we've got a farmer panel, and I think the researchers will also join on the panel as well. So all things flame weeding in this session, and so tanks for being here, propane tanks for being here. And we're going to get started kicking off. There is a last-minute change to your program here. And so George Gogos, unfortunately, is not able to be here. But we were very lucky to have Chris Bruening here in his stead. So, and he's going to kick it off here, and then we're going to transition over to Stevan. And so without further ado, Chris, please.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, I'm Chris Bruening. Did my grad school work, actually undergrad and grad school, at the University of Nebraska, and my colleague Steve, and then George Gogos, who's a colleague of mine now, former grad school advisor. I worked under those two guys in my grad school work on flame weeding equipment research. A little bit about my just background about myself. I did grow up on a small farm in northeast Nebraska, and went down to Lincoln for, I got my degree in mechanical engineering. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about important features in what we found is important in flame weeding equipment. So right at the start, probably 2006, 2007, Steve identified that existing flame weeding equipment had some significant limitations. It was fairly rudimentary, a toolbar, some sort of tank, may have been an old anhydrous tank, some plumbing down to torches, and you pull that through the field. That was a kind of your standard flame weeder when we started researching the topic. And, you know, engineers, we will say we know everything, but honestly we don't. So this synergy of agronomy pairing with us engineering really balanced out, helped fill in our gaps on plant and weed growth stages, when to do bring the equipment out in the field that we've designed and improved. And looking at identifying, important features that we found within flaming equipment, probably the first one was getting a hood over those torches to help contain the heat that is being generated from the combustion of that propane. So if you have any experience with, say, any type of flame, or especially a very hot propane torch like this, those combustion gases come out of that torch, they hit the ground, and if there is nothing there to keep them there, they almost go straight up out of your treatment zone. So that's where getting a hood over them, containing them down near the ground, was a big improvement in basically treatment efficiency and consistency. Keeping the wind, another component of that panel, keeping the wind from pushing that heat out of your treatment zone. So in flame weeding equipment, there's kind of two different, let's say, treatment styles or treatment zones. The most common is you'll see banded flaming. That is a treatment band centered over the crop row. And then what we call full flaming, or probably more commonly is termed broadcast flaming, where you cover a just general the whole area underneath your equipment pass that you would be pulling through the field. Another item, electronic ignition. Removing the operator from that starting point of going back, having to manually open a fuel valve and manually ignite all those torches was a big improvement in safety. Basically, again, removing the operator from that quite dangerous manual ignition process. Another one, the propane industry is still kind of almost a Wild West type environment compared to, say, natural gas or gasoline and diesel fuel. There's still not a lot of, common knowledge on what is code and what you need to do to keep yourself safe. And one of those big ones is a propane tank. You have that propane in there under pressure, and that keeps it in that liquid form, that tank pressure. And when you are pulling that through the field for a mobile application like flaming, that fuel sloshes around a little bit. That generates a lot of dynamic forces in that mobile application. And let's say you're in a muddy field, you come and hit a rut and your tractor stops short. That slosh of, say, a full tank of propane, if it is not rated for mobile use, it could literally rip the tank off the feet of, basically off the mounting points of that tank and spill propane. Not a situation you want to get into. The last item. This goes back to the combination of agronomy and engineering. Treatment recipes. An engineering group could design the best flaming equipment in the world, but if you pull it out in the field and don't know when to use it, or don't know how to basically apply it to the crop with the proper treatment recipe, and know what is going to happen to your crop while still sufficiently killing or terminating, controlling weeds, it's that perfectly designed equipment is kind of useless without a good treatment recipe. So again, this is kind of just an overview of, so you have banded flaming and full flaming or broadcast options. And then the other aspect, if you got those hoods out in the field, if you got a young crop, you want some way to close up those hoods and have a fully contained heat zone to treat your weeds. However, if you go into a mid to late season crop, taller corn, taller soybeans, you want something to be able to open a gap in those panels and allow the crop to pass through while still keeping that heat down near the ground. So here's some temperature measurement results from our engineering design work on hoods. So on this slide, there's quite a bit of information. So say a cross or side view, you got a propane torch here and that hood panel side view running here. That heat is generated, directed underneath that panel. And at the University of Nebraska in the engineering college, we have a combustion lab. We put one of these setups up on a measurement bench, ran the torches, and there are 4 experiments done here. So each one of these rectangles is a different set of operating conditions. It's a 4-inch tall zone that we measured temperature, 12 inches wide. 12 inches wide is your standard banded flaming zone. We ran a couple different pressures, 40 and 60 PSI. Basically, more fuel coming into there, higher temperatures would be generated at that higher pressure. This top row, open torches. So what we defined as basically a setup that does not have hoods. On the bottom is your hooded setup. So in this cross-section view, these open torch measurements were done without the panel there. Last thing to look at here, this bar graph over here on the far right is temperature contours, colors. Way down at the bottom, dark blue, 0 degrees, all the way up to bright yellow, 1500 Celsius or 2700 degrees Fahrenheit. Very hot at that bright yellow temp. So go through these rectangles again, that 4-inch by 12-inch wide measurement zone, and we are 24 inches downstream of the torch in where we took all 4 of these temperature measurement setups. Here, open torch at 40 psi, that lower pressure, you do see a little bit of color getting up into approaching about 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, up to 60 psi, the open torch. You increase that zone, we're up over, probably approaching 2000 degrees Fahrenheit in that treatment zone there. Again, 24 inches downstream of that torch. Drop down to the hood, and it's obviously, there is significantly higher temperatures being contained underneath that hood panel. Again, 40 and 60, and also the uniformity of those temperatures within that treatment zone are significantly improved. Let's go 2 more feet downstream, 48 inches downstream. We are actually outside of the hood panel at this point. The open torches, they are cooled off. If you're a weed that's 1/2 inch tall sitting down at that soil height, you're fine with an open torch setup. At 40 or 60, you're a little bit warm here on the 60 psi side, but still down below, let's say 800 degrees Fahrenheit, or below a sufficient temperature to treat a weed at the common travel speeds of flame weeding. In the hood, we do cool off, but let's say looking at 60 psi, it contains that heat and those combustion gases and almost generates a high temperature jet that extends beyond that hood and further increases that treatment zone and better utilizes the heat being produced from that propane. Here's just kind of a quick view of one method of, so you have a panel here with extensions that you can either open or close that gap. It's one idea on basically providing a full season hood setup. Here's some pictures of equipment out in the field. You can see that gap on this 4-row flamer out in, I believe this was young corn just spiking out. It's fully closed, contain that heat down there and get the most use out of it. Going into late season corn, taller, you'd be running down that corn if you had a fully closed hood, open that gap, allow the crop to pass through, keep that heat down near the ground, improve weed control, minimize crop injury. Because, and Steve will get into, again, more of the agronomy aspect of this, but it is a, basically, the heat doesn't care what it basically exposes itself or, what the heat is exposed to, it's going to treat. It's non-selective in that regard. So these hoods, again, keep that heat down, reduce crop injury, and improve weed control. Here's just a quick kind of overhead view of a banded flaming setup. One important point here, one torch on each side of the row. We found that that's the best setup in regards to trying to effectively treat this 12-inch banded zone, but not putting the absolute max temp right on the crop. So you get your max temps, especially right in that visible flame zone to the left and right of the crop, and then there is just a minor, say, reduction that crop is not completely exposed to those extreme temps coming right out of that visible flame zone. What the dual torch setup also provides in this regard, you can flip them, reconfigure, and do then full flaming or that broadcast across a 30-inch row. Say full flaming, an application for that, say the season, your spring is very wet, you can't cultivate, full flaming offers an option to maintain weed control across that full row while, try basically keep your weeds down while waiting for, the chance to get in there with your cultivation equipment. Torch setup, orientation. You'll see a lot of flamers out there that this varies anywhere from directing the flame right at the crop row, a cross flaming or perpendicular flame setup. We chose this more parallel setup. It worked much more effectively with the hood panels, further reduced crop injury, and also you would be traveling on this picture in the upward direction, and your heat is all being directed back away from your tractor and equipment. Common torch angles in terms of setup, anywhere from 30 to 45 degrees. I've seen anywhere all the way up to 60 degrees. The big thing you want to, it's kind of an optimization of you want the heat to get down to the ground, but also you don't want it to strike the ground and curl back behind the torch and up into the equipment. So it's kind of a balance there. Again, this slide's probably more, Steve will cover, the treatment aspects of it, but probably the point here, early season, close up those hoods to contain the heat. Later season, open a gap, allow that tall crop to pass through. I don't know how well this picture comes into view, but it was, just one example of, the power of a banded flaming treatment in an organic weed management program. This picture was taken one day after a banded flaming treatment in 3 to 4 leaf corn, about 6 inches tall. And you can see weed pressure was very healthy in this field, but where this treated, left of that red line, you have these dark bands centered on that crop row. Over right of that red line, untreated area in this field is still a nice, quite green carpet there. And if we zoom in, this treatment band contained within these two red lines, you can see all these little velvet leaf and foxtail carcasses are dead within that treatment band. Yes, the corn looks tough, and that's one thing you have to kind of come to grips with in flaming. You basically don't want to look at your young cornfield after you flamed it the next day. It looks terrible, but they're still standing up. You got a green shoot there. New leaves will come up out of that whorl, and you are at a significant advantage in terms of knocking out that weed pressure right in that crop row where a steel sweep cannot run. Let's see. And here's just a quick video of actually flame weeding in late season soybeans. So yes, you can do flaming in soybeans. Open up that gap, you can flame down below there, and if, say, you get a late season flush of weeds in a soybean field, you can use that setup with those hoods, keep that heat down, and safely knock out that late season flush in soybeans. So just a few more notes on, the technical aspects of flaming and the equipment. Safety should always be, your number one priority in any ag equipment. This is, no different for flame weeding. We are throwing in, these high temperatures, a pressurized fuel source, so again, safety should always be your number one priority with flaming equipment. And again, you know, especially with those mobile versus stationary tanks, not all flame weeding equipment is created equal. So, you know, be informed on, you know, does the equipment meet all the safety codes and standards set up for propane burning equipment? Because propane handled safely can be very safe, but if it's handled improperly, it can be very dangerous. So you want to stay on that safe side of the line. Just another observation, again, with all, you know, weed control methods, small weeds are easier to kill with flaming. There's less biomass there, less material to heat up. Just a final note there. Steve, again, will pick up here with the agronomy side of things. And the improvement in yield, say that banded flaming example, knocking out those weeds within that corn row and allowing that corn to then go uncompeted with in its continued growth, the yield improvements with adding flaming can be significant. So with that, I will pass it off to Steve.
Good afternoon, or good morning, everybody. I guess they told me I have to stay here. I'm kind of a people person. I like to walk around so I can see people's faces and all that. But I guess I'll have to stick to this mic. So let's see how this is going to work. I guess before I start, just to tell you a little bit about my, people ask me, oh, you got an interesting accent. Where's that coming from? I said, oh, we talk like that in Nebraska. Everybody is like that. You know, I live in a special part of Nebraska called Omaha. Anyway, and they said, oh, come on, Steve, that's not true. I said, yeah, you're right. That's not true. Anyway, I was born and raised in former Yugoslavia, and I came over here in '86. So I've been here like, what, almost 40 years of my life, adult life, most of my adult life. I'm 60-year-old now. So anyway, got scholarships here, did my master's, my PhD. They gave me a university position to teach, and I'm teaching integrated weed management class in Nebraska. I've been doing that for, like I said, since 98. So that's why in my presentations here it says another tool for weed management. You know, I do truly believe in the phrase, you need a whole toolbox if you want to manage tools. I've never been a big fan of Roundup Ready Technology. The company that came with that, I don't need to mention their name. It's a big M and it's not McDonald's. So anyway, I buck heads with them from day one, you know. So anyway, in fact, last week I was, you know, my actually research at university is to look at all kinds of weed control methods, and I'm the editor of Nebraska Weed Guide, which is about 400-page book that lists all the chemicals for weed control in Nebraska, as well as the organic, non-chemical methods of weed control. So anyway, and so I do work with organic guys. Larry has been our guinea pig from day one, and he's been really good. And you know, he's a little bit on the crazy side, and I told you, Larry, we'll get along just fine. I'm crazy too. So, you know, when we started to do this research, you know, we actually started in 2006, I believe. That was the year when I actually got some first grants. And then also, I'm going to try to squeeze literally a 6 hour of a workshop that we teach in Nebraska every year in mid-August, so that's a plug for that workshop. And then, so these are some pictures of some students. This is Chris driving this tractor, and as he mentioned earlier, you know, he's a Nebraska kid, and he worked with George and me, you know, on his master's and PhD. And George is actually born and raised in Greece, so, and I'm from just north of Greece, from Serbia, from University of Belgrade. So basically, the two of us came to the States. We got some money. Actually, at one point in time, we had over $2 million in grants on this. I had like 18 students working on this project, and we had a lot of fun. So I actually joke about it. I said, George, look at this. You know, Both of us are from the Balkan area, and we come to U.S., they gave us some power, and look what we are doing. We're trying to burn the world. So anyway, but speaking of burning, literally, we burned $2 million worth of propane for this research, and that's how I can stand here. And I go all over the world. I teach on this subject, and then we try to flame these crops, 7 different crops, in so many different stages. So that's why I am pretty confident, that our recipes work. And so I guess with a little bit of a longer introduction, this is not flame weeding. I just want to make sure to get that out of the way. And here's the one of the slides that I show, the list of people, probably 30 plus people. I got a lot of students that come from overseas, many European countries. I had scientists from European countries because European Union is trying to push the organic production over there. And then so they send a lot of their scientists to work with us in Nebraska on this topic. And in fact, some of my former students are now professors. I have Michele is a professor at University of Italy, in Pisa in Italy. I have some students in Slovenia, some in Czech Republic. They're all promoting flaming as a method of weed control. And of course, first few years, I noticed problem with the existing equipment. I called actually the company that make the equipment. I don't want to mention the name, but they told me, there's nothing wrong with our equipment. I said, haven't you guys thought of having some kind of a shields or something to keep that heat down and everything? Oh no, we've been selling this technology for 40 years. There's nothing wrong with it. And I said, you know what, guys? I think that's your problem. You've been selling a 40-year-old technology. So I came up with George, and we started doing this research. And as a result of that, you've seen some of the slides from George, from Chris's presentation. We do have equipment now that's pretty much a Cadillac, the market for that. And then everything that I'm going to talk about here, we published. I have over 20 scientific papers that was published in international literature. So everything that I'm covering here, it's all been well received and documented in scientific literature, which is the reason I keep going and visiting about this topic, all over the country and all over the world. So anyway, we also published a flame weeding manual, which is basically this. This was, we did receive some funding. We had like a little over $1.5 million from different USDA organic grants on this. And then also we received a bunch of money from the National Propane Research and Education Council. And they actually funded this publication. So I can pass this around if you want to take a look at it. We have some extra copies with Chris over at the booth. And and you can also go to National Propane Research Council website and download this publication for free, or just simply shoot me an email. I'll send you a PDF of this pub. And that pub is pretty much, they call it a Bible for flaming. And also some of the guys, when they introduced me, they said, this is Steve, and he's the grandfather of flaming. So I don't know, you take your pick. Take your pick on this. But it's an excellent publication written in lay terms, so people can, everybody should be able to understand. Okay, so basically how flaming works, we're not out there, a bunch of pyromaniacs burning, everything that comes across. If you use the right equipment and you follow the recipes and everything, you have this heat shield that keeps moving at about 3 to 5 miles an hour. And then along the way, you're using a method that's non-selective. It's going to hurt the weeds, but it's going to hurt the crop. So again, you got to know what you're doing. And but using this method, basically, you're exposing plant tissue. And I said purposely plant tissue. I'm not saying a weed or crop tissue, because either one is a plant. And then you're transferring the heat. And in order to coagulate the proteins or the enzyme inside the plants, you need about a little over a couple of hundred Fahrenheit degrees, and then and then for about a 1 split second, literally, you get water boiling. And then when the water boils inside the plant tissue, the cell walls cannot hold that and expands and it bursts. And basically that's how you're literally popping up individual cells inside the plant tissue. And that's how the cell wall leakage and everything and the plants die. And literally, the flamer runs through and you go behind and you grab the plant tissue. And if you get a thumbprint, like this, that means the flaming worked. And the reason for that is that plants are pressurized, same like our body is pressurized. If we cut yourself, the blood is going to start shooting out because our body is pressurized, the plant tissue is pressurized. If you break a leaf, the sap will start coming out. I guess the fact that you're getting a thumbprint, that means that the plant tissue inside is disintegrating and the flaming worked. Okay, like any other machine, you can, calibrate this, get the speed, different pressure, and then, that's kind of self-explanatory. I don't need to go to a lot of details here. You've seen some of these shots on what machines work. Another thing that we did is, because one of the common ways of controlling weeds in organic production is cultivation. And in fact, I like to work with organic guys. I walk into Larry's machine shed, and he's got some equipment there that could be in a museum, but he still uses it, works. And he said, my grandpa bought these like, I don't know how many years ago, and I'm still using it. And I said, hey, good for you, just keep using it. So we actually try to combine cultivation and flaming. So we ended up developing these little torches. And this is one of the cultivators that we use. We took some of the shanks out, and we put the torches over the crop row, and the shanks left in between the crop rows. So we've done some of that type of work there too. This is some of the projects that we have at local farms. This is a big farm in Jefferson, Iowa, where the guy has this big cat, and then this big rig where he is flaming and cultivating. So this is some of our research flamers that we used. These are some shots so you can see actually the heat, the source, and like depending on the different pressure, whether you use a 10 psi versus a 60 psi. And this is the edge of the hood, so you can see all that heat escaping the hood. So most of our flamings are done with the PSI ranging from like a 50 to a 60 PSI. All right, so let's talk quickly about weed responses. We published, like I said, multiple manuscripts on this topic. We actually planted individual weeds, where you can see here. These are rows of individual weeds. I buy weed seeds. We save weed seeds. You put them in the little junior planter. You push the planter out. You let the weeds come up, and you have 20 rows, 20 different weed species, and we run a flamer across to generate the data. And so basically, we were using what we call the dose response concept. My lab is actually known internationally for developing this concept. I work with chemicals. So, like I said, I help organic guys, but my job as an extension weed specialist is to work on all kinds of methods of weed control. So I do have to know the chemicals and everything. So we've been using this method for chemical control, or determining the rates of different chemicals for different weed species and crop tolerance and all that. So basically, I use the same approach for, instead of having chemical A, B, or C in the tank, I just have a propane. Same approach. And then, these are some shots of some grasses, some broadleaves before and after flaming, 10 gallons per acre, about 5 days after flaming. These are some fancy curves we develop for determining the rates, and this is field bindweed. You can see before and after flaming, and these are the rates that are showing in 90% control. This is, you will see here, European units, the metric system in kilograms per hectares and gallons per acres. Like I said, I travel around the world. I talk about this topic. So basically, anywhere from 8 to 12 gallons an acre, regardless of the weed size. We took care of these. And like I said, I'm just quickly going through all this. I spent literally 6 hours in Nebraska going through each one of those topics in much more detail. So if anybody is interested in it, like I said, that workshop is always in middle of August. Just shoot me an email, and then we'll be happy to have you. So these are some of the weed species, and I have about 3 slides. I'm not going to spend too much time on each one of these. These are different heights of these weeds, and you look down the propane rates. That's pretty much for everybody's interested in. So you can see the rates are all hovering somewhere about, for smaller weeds, about 10 gallons an acre, unless you have some weeds that are like 2 feet or even 3 feet tall. We can kill. Pig weeds are pretty sensitive to flaming. We had 30-inch tall pigweed that we smoked without any problems. Same here. Here's the list of weeds, including some grasses. The grasses require a little bit more heat, and I can explain that why. Okay, and then there's a few more shots with lamb's quarter, tansy mustard, hand bits. These 2 are winter annuals. We see them growing in the fall and early in the spring. And this hand bit is that little purple flowers that you see across the landscape in no-till systems. I see that all over Midwest, and we can control those. Without any problems. However, like any other methods of weed control, flaming, like I said, it's just another tool in your toolbox. You better have other tools. If you think you bought a flamer, now you solve your problems. It's like, come on, no, you might be in for a surprise. So you want to have other tools. And also, no tool controls all the weeds. Even the glyphosate, the Roundup, which is fantastic chemical from the strictly plant management standpoint. And we managed to ruin it because we were using way too much of it and everything. Even Roundup doesn't kill all the plants. And plus now we have 18 different weed species that develop resistance across U.S. Because of the overuse of Roundup. Anyway, so same applies for flaming. There are some weed species that flaming is not going to get as good, including some ragweed. I'm sure you guys know what ragweed is. It's all over this part of the country. In Minnesota, I get a lot of phone calls. I've been giving these talks all over Wisconsin and Minnesota. We've been going to that other conference in La Crosse that's called Marble Seeds now. It used to be called Moses. And we've been speakers there. Anyway, so field pennycress, dandelion is a perennial, and you can ask me questions later if you want to know on other perennials. Flaming will pretty much control everything that's above the soil surface. If the plant has perennial root structures, perennial rhizomes, stolons, whatever the perennial structures are below the soil surface, flaming is not going to touch it, so that's why they're going to see some regrowth. And then that's the field pennycress. You guys, I'm sure, know what that looks like. It's got a pretty fat, water-filled tissue, and it needs a lot of heat to actually, evaporate and burst that water tissue. So we just get a temporary control of pennycress. It just keeps coming back. The dandelions, this was. Non-flamed, it's flowered, and the flame, we knocked the pants off, the tissue, and it didn't flower. It regrew, but, you can do some multiple flaming as well, and we can talk about that later. I want to make sure I finish on time so that we can have our panel discussion. Ragweed is the one that's problematic. It keeps regrowing. I flame it, and it regrows, and you can see here, it's all dead. Look at that. It's all dead, and it comes back, and we flame these particular plots about 3 times every 2 weeks, and the darn thing keeps coming back and laughing at me and said, Steve, you ain't going to kill me. So anyway, so basically, this is kind of a conclusion that most broadleafs, flaming should take care of it. Like I said, not all, but most of them. Grasses are a little bit higher. The whole point about this grasses issue is actually not just grasses, but also flaming, is where is the growing point of the plant relative to the heat source. So the grassy weeds and the grassy crops, they have their growing point below the soil surface for the first 3 to 4 weeks of the season. That's why corn-type sorghum is pretty resilient to flaming, because the growing point is below the soil surface. For broadleaf weeds, the growing point is above the soil surface. It keeps going with the plant. And then that's why soybean or sunflower are sensitive to flaming. If you flame soybeans when the growing point is exposed and everything, then you gotta hurt those beans, and the same applies. You're gonna hurt those broadleaves, which is what we want. So that's kind of the premise and the way the flaming works. Anyway, so quickly, these are some of the crops that we work with a single and multiple flaming. And then again, I'm going to run through this pretty fast. Corn is pretty resilient. There's the V3, V4, V6 corn. We can flame corn all the way up to literally canopy closure, which is about a V10, V11 stage, and that corn will bounce back. The soybean is a whole different game out there. You have to really know what you're doing with soybeans. You can flame them at this stage, which only lasts about 3 or 4 days on the beginning of the season, that cotyledon stage. As long as the cotyledons are closed or partially open, you're okay. But if you get to a stage where the growing point is completely exposed, then you're going to hurt those beans, and you're going to have quite a bit of yield reduction. Again, because of the time, I don't have slides with yield reductions and everything, but we have all that covered in the different literatures. So soybeans, you cannot flame anywhere from that unifoliate stage when the cotyledons are open and you only see 2 little leaves there, all the way up to about a V3 stage, because on that time the plants are short and you cannot put the heat down below the canopy. And with the torches, once the beans get to that V4 stage, V5 stage, or V6 stage, which is when they start flowering, you can still flame. And then with those torches, you're going to have heat down. Actually, with the hoods, you'll have the heat down below. It will prevent the heat of rising and burning up the soybean canopy. The same applies for sunflower. You can flame at the beginning stage, and then when you get to about a V4, V6 stage, you stay out of it. And then until later, when you have some size there, the hoods are down below, and the growing point is above the hoods and it's protected. So if you nip the bottom leaves and everything, it's not a big deal. You're not gonna hurt. So Chris mentioned how corn looks ugly. I remember when we flamed corn in Larry's experiments, 2000, whatever, 8, 9, 10. There's a couple of other guys in Larry's neighborhood that work with us on this. And, these guys will call me next morning and say, "Hey, Steve, looks like you killed my corn." I said, "Don't worry about it. Just, I'll come over. I'll explain to you again what happened." And then you go back and that corn recovers fully, no problem whatsoever. Same for beans. Like I said, if you flame them at the right growth stages, you are okay. And then, so this is pretty much my last slide for all these crops where we've done the research. The grassy type crops are okay. You can flame them twice in the season, no problem. You can flame earlier before, if you have a flash of weeds, you haven't planted the crop yet, and you want to do a broadcast flaming across everything before the crop is up, sure, you can flame that, or you can plant the crop and flame, or go either way. That wouldn't count as one of those two. But once the crop is up and it gets exposed to heat and everything, they can take 2 shots per season without any problems. We don't recommend doing any flaming in winter wheat because we were injuring wheat way too much. So I guess with that, I'll just stop, and then we'll open the floor for our panel, or if you guys have any questions for Chris and myself, I'll be more than happy to answer. So thank you.
All right, yeah, so as Steve said, we'll transition over to farmer panel here, and I do have some visual aids from you farmers, but first I'll ask you all to just kind of introduce yourself, where you're from, your experience with flaming, and then should anyone ask a question that you need some photos, I'm happy to pull that up for you all. So yeah, Chris and Steve, could you please join them over there just in case folks have questions? And so Larry, would you like to kick us off here?
Well, my name is Larry Stanislav, and Dr. Steven here has explained some of our situation. I was an organic farmer, or am an organic farmer. I've been actually certified for 37 years, and when I was asked to participate in this research project, myself, along with several of my other organic neighbors, were going to cooperate with Steven and his group. So the way we worked that out is we would plant a crop. In particular, it was corn at that time, and Chris and Steven would flame the crop in their section of the plot, and I was right next to it doing my type of tillage, and I being organic, in fact, my whole life, like I said, I've been certified organic for 37 years. We never used any chemicals on the farm. In fact, the last time any chemicals were used were 1972. So we had done the best we could with the equipment we had, which was, like Steven mentioned, Grandpa probably bought it. But we did the best we could, and so we got to be very good at weed control using crop rotation and the different tillage methods and the way we planted our crops. And then with the cultivation, using rotary hoes, different cultivators. There was a point where I had maybe 4 or 5 different cultivators, different types of cultivators, and I might change through all 5 of those cultivators in a single day trying to find something that would do the job I wanted. So when they came along with this flamer and we were comparing results, I'm going, my God, I worked so hard to get where I was at, and I still have weeds in the row, and Chris and Steven had clean rows. So eventually they let me use the flamer on more and more of my acres, and I was going, my goodness, this really is an essential tool, or a very helpful tool. It's not the only tool that I use, because I do use the flamer in both corn and soybeans, but I still rely on things like rotary hoes, and I still have about 3 or 4 cultivators set up different ways. I also rely on crop rotation and the types of tillage that I do, even the way I plant some of my crops, how I leave the soil to reduce the emergence of weeds and things. But you know how it works. Mother Nature may change your plans and operations for that year from what you did the year before when you thought you had it all down pat. So anyway, I've been using a flamer for quite a while, and I'm very happy with it. And I guess I have, some, you could say, not requirements, but I would encourage you to make sure that if you're using a flamer, don't wait too long. Use it sooner than later. And I've also found that a flamer is kind of a precision tool. I thought, I've got a flamer. I can just go down the corn row there, and I can be looking at the trees over there and the birds in the sky and so on. Well, I found that if you didn't have your heat concentrated on the area that you want, many times just being off a few inches could make a difference in the weed control you have. I remember there was one time I was flaming soybeans at the cotyledon stage, and the indicator on the flamer showed that all 6 rows were burning, so all my torches were burning. I came back 2 days later to one part of an area of a field, and I had 5 rows that were nicely burned down. The weeds were all taken care of. And there was one row that was green with weeds. And I'm going, what happened here? I went back to my flamer, and I found that a pin had fallen out. And my torches, instead of being angled down correctly, were blowing the heat up in the air. And so just that little bit of difference, that not having that thing adjusted and throwing the heat where it was supposed to go, I fought those weeds all summer long, and I'm sad to say I took pictures of that, and I have that on my phone, and then for whatever reason my phone fell apart, and I lost all that. But to me, it was an excellent example of how you even have to be precise in using a flamer and putting that heat where you need it. But it's a very valuable tool in my arsenal for weed control. We're probably going to look at some pictures here in a while, and I'll show you some of the things I do, but I don't want to take up too much time here because I think we need to share experiences here, and I would sooner answer questions about how I might do things and so on. So thank you very much.
Hi, Rusty Olson. I'm from Garner, Iowa, and I guess a little background, my operation, I've been involved in organics since, I think I got right around 2017, 2018. We started with our first 40 that was actually taken out of CRP. That was a disaster. I wouldn't recommend doing that. But that was a tough learning curve. We started transitioning more acres at that point. Quite honestly, what drives a person to get into organics, there's many different reasons. Mine was more of a financial thing. Trying to pay off $1 million line of credit with $750,000 a few years in a row, you start to look at different options, I guess. So, but we just, there's a lot of issues that were going on in that time frame of farming, and it was tough to manage it. And we started looking at different options, and this looked viable, and so far it's been working. But the one thing I did learn early on was weed control was critical, and talking to a very few organic farmers I could find in my area, it wasn't about the weeds that were growing in between the rows, it was the weeds that were growing right next to the crops. And so how do you combat that? Started going to a few seminars that were put on by AgriSecure and just different organic organizations around Iowa. And the flamer just kept coming up, and saw the AFI flamer first at one of the conferences I went to, or one of the field shows I went to, and I was very impressed. Very tight budget at the time, so I had to come up with a way to do it on a fixed budget, and started looking around, found a few different options, found this gentleman, found Red Dragon, ended up going with that, built my own first toolbar out of an old 30-foot sprayer that we had laying out in the grove, and it actually turned out working very well for us. We just had to learn how to position torches, and I guess reiterating what he said, the most critical thing in organics is actually getting out and looking at what's going on, not just assuming that everything's working properly. We're constantly moving torches up and down, in and out, trying to make sure that flame's directed as far as close to the base of the plant as possible to minimize crop damage while maximizing weed damage. And same with the cultivators, constantly moving sweeps on the 3-sweep cultivators. Single sweep cultivators a little bit more forgiving. You just learn over time that there's just settings are critical. You can't just put anyone out in a cultivator, throw them on RTK, and think they're just going to do a great job, because if they're not looking back once in a while, then they're missing something. So it's a long learning curve. It's been a great journey for me. I really enjoy what I do. I am also a conventional farmer, and it's interesting to get my 4930 sprayer and go blast on $50 worth of crop protection, and for no weeds that are in the field. And then, you get a little bit of criticism for being out there flaming and cultivating and doing all the things we do. And it's like, why are you making all those extra passes? Well, this doesn't even total up to what I'm spraying in my conventional fields, and we have a higher potential of revenue here. We have to maintain, and if we get behind one day or every time you get behind a weed, it's exponentially a mess. So it is down to management. Timing is everything, and it's very critical, as you guys all know, because you're all here for the same reason. But it's an exciting operation. I love what we do, and I always love to learn more, and that's why I love these conferences. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
I'm Dennis Lutteke, Wells, Minnesota. My wife and I, we've been farming, well, I should back up a little bit here. Been farming all my life, except for 2 years when I had to work for the government in the military. And 79 we stopped all fertilizers, and 82 we stopped all pesticides. And in the early 80s, we, George Yokel, a neighbor of ours, we found down in, I think he went down to Mississippi, picked up some AFCO torches that were made back in the 40s, and we brought them home, we cleaned them up, got them to work, and yeah, they did work. They're a little rust in them, but you had a lot of problems with them. So we made our own torch. Right now, the best I can count, we've sold probably about 70,000 torches that we have made, and people have put them on their bars, or we built it for them. And I think also for crops that we raise certified organic peas, sweet corn, black beans for Everbest, and we raise seed oats. Then we also have an 80-cow dairy, our son and I, and now our grandson's coming into the operation a little bit. So we still got the corn silage, and everything else. We've got a good rotation. I do believe rotation is, a large rotation like that does help with weed control a lot. And the flaming, we use it. There's certain years we don't have to. If I had to pick between, say, maybe a tine weeder and a flamer, that'd be a tough one. I like the tine weeders very well, like for beans, and we even use some in the peas and our sweet corn. But yet we still come back to the flamer mostly for the corn and young beans.
Thank you all so much. Audience, now is the time that you've been waiting for. you get to ask your burning questions. So I would invite you all to come up to the microphone in the center, town hall style, and ask your questions. Microphone will make sure your grandkids can watch this on YouTube in 150 years and say, hey, look at that. And so panelists, if a question comes up that you want me to pull up a photo, please let me know. Yeah, they're beautiful photos, so yeah. Don't make me call you out.
You had a slide with simultaneous flaming and cultivation, but more so I'm interested in timing between, we can't use tines, we're on rotary hose because of crusting issues, just nature of our soil. Timing between a flame pass and rotary hoe, whether it's before or after, and then similarly, V6 corn, are you flaming before or after that cultivation and timing thereof?
He was asking about flaming, cultivation or tillage following a flaming or before a flaming. I guess I'll touch on that quickly. At first, we were hoping it would maybe decrease the amount of in-row tillage we'd have to do. I guess the one thing, once again, timing is everything, especially when it comes to flaming, just as he had mentioned. Getting those weeds when they're small, and I've got some pictures on it I'd love to show too, but the critical stage, and it's just like spraying Roundup. If you're trying to spray Roundup on a weed that's 8-10 inches tall, you're just going to piss it off and it's going to come back stronger. The flamer is basically the same way, and if you can get these small grasses or these small broadleaves, even little cockleburrs, anything like that, when they're really short, you can really droop them down, set them down. They're going to fall over and look like they're dead. You do the finger test and everything, and you see your fingerprint on it. Okay, great. We've had really good luck with that, but we've also seen 30-40% recovery. And if we can get out there with, in my situation, I love my Henniker cultivators. They're 60-foot wide, and we can run those things in RTK at 8-9 miles an hour, and we can really throw some dirt on V5, V6 corn, and we can bury that stuff, and it just becomes non-existent. And I guess that's I will basically chase down a flamer with a cultivator. I like to follow flaming with cultivation right away. Don't see much effectiveness with a rotary hoe per se in the row. Of course, at V5, you're not going to be rotary hoeing. Early flaming beans, you could probably utilize that practice. I've got some pictures I'll show you of soybeans that were flamed early stage and later stages, and we've just seen enough yield decreases in early flaming soybeans at the wrong time to definitely don't do it. The cotyledon stage, you can get away with it, as he had mentioned. Otherwise, we've got to be at that V4, V5 on soybeans, or of course you're limited to in-row tillage again with your cultivator. But once again, we'll follow the flaming with cultivation right away on the soybeans as well, just to bury whatever we're flaming, just to get it covered up, and that second effort of kill with the dirt on top.
Right.
This was, yep. It was, yeah, that was, I always say it kind of looks like they got dinged with dicamba or something like that. But I don't know if you can go back to, there's a good side-by-side picture, and that's this same field. That's making lunch. You can actually cook your hot dogs with your flamer. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
I apologize. I threw way too many pictures on here. It's my daughter. She loves farming. Hopefully she'll stick with it someday, but I'm guessing right now her choice is volleyball, and she wants to move to the University of Nebraska because they got the best volleyball team. So, and I'm Iowa State.
Smart girls.
I know, and I'm Iowa State, so Dad's having a hard time with this, but we'll follow wherever she wants to go. Here's some more soybeans that we really charred them at the, what was that, third trifoliate. We were just playing around with different things, and we just discovered that, we were looking at 15 bushel yield loss at that stage. They recovered, they came back, but we just saw too many yield losses. That cotyledon stage, like you had mentioned, it does work very well in soybeans, especially if you have a very narrow window of opportunity to get that done. So I guess as he had mentioned, the tine weeder for soybeans, my biggest culprit is foxtail grass, and it seems like the tine weeder does the best job with that. I'll overseed soybeans just knowing I'm going to tear them out with a tine weeder to have cleaner beans. So, but somewhere in there's a very good side-by-side picture where there you go. Did a phenomenal job on the weed control. If you look on the left, I can't even remember what we were burning off there, but was really very effective. But we took I believe we measured out about a 10 bushel yield loss at that stage, burning those beans like that. So to do it again, I would not. We should have been a little more proactive with tine weeder at that point to keep that weed patch down. That was in a low spot where it's always been a weedy issue. So, but it is fun to go through, and especially at the small weed stages, and see what you can do with a flamer, because they definitely have potential. Like I said, we are not around the hoods. Would love to have the hoods. I see the definite benefits of keeping that flame where it needs to, or that heat where it needs to be. But like I said, placement of our torches, keeping them low and slow. We do a kind of a crossfire, if you will, with two flames going to each row. It's critical to have a flame on each side of the row. You can't just have one torch on one side because you're going to miss half your weeds. But just keeping it low, and especially if you keep your corn at that V4 or V5. We tried the V1, V2. You can burn corn off. The growing point's below the ground. It's going to grow back. You're just on a fishing boat and leave for a week and come back. But I prefer that V4, V5. Just try to stay ahead of your weeds in the meantime. Make sure your weeds aren't getting taller than what the torch can control. Of course, same as your tillage. So, like I said, timing is everything.
I have to agree with Rusty. You want to follow up the flamer with the cultivator as quickly as you can. I would wait at least a day. Some people have said, oh, just a few hours. Well, if I'm having some issues with foxtail, the foxtail might be up there as tall as the corn. Let's say we're talking something 6 to 9 inches tall already. The foxtail, you won't kill it, but it will wilt down. So if you can come through and throw a little dirt up there and bury it or even pin it down, you'll be surprised how well you can control that. And if there's any broadleaves and those types of things, that's why I'm hoping we can find some of the slides I have that will show how you can barely see the corn for the broadleaves, and then after I flamed it and cultivated it, it really comes up fairly clean, and you get way ahead of the weeds. I've had good success in flaming soybeans at the cotyledon stage. I've never flamed anything at any other stage, but usually the flaming at cotyledon stage, and then I go in there with a rotary hoe, and I use a double rotary hoe, and I'll hit the soybeans maybe twice, because they can take you can take the abuse at that point. And then after that, I go to cultivating with, I use Buffalo cultivators. I think I should really be trying the flamer at some of these later stages, but I'm always a little hesitant to do that, because usually by the time I get done with the flaming, the cotyledon stage, and the hoeing and cultivating, I've got some pretty good weed control. And I think one of the pictures we had up here earlier was my soybeans from 2016. And I wish I would have taken pictures of this year's soybeans, because it was beautiful. But I didn't take any pictures, not thinking I was going to be coming and talking to anybody. So, but anyway, I usually try to follow up flaming with cultivation fairly quickly, especially in corn.
Let me just quickly add to this point. You can actually see on this photo where Larry flamed first, and then he came back a day later and he cultivated, but he actually threw a little bit more dirt. So I call this a little bit more of an aggressive cultivation, almost created like a little burn here. So he threw that dirt on the top of the foxtails, and we actually found that in our research as well. That foxtail will regrow, I guarantee you, but if you didn't throw the dirt on top of it. But if you throw the dirt on top of it, you get almost 90% control, no regrowth. And the only thing that I can try to explain that, again, as an agronomist and biologist, that those plants don't have much of the sunlight coming through that dirt, and so therefore they're not driven. And I could be wrong, but that kind of logically makes sense. So that goes back to your original question: flame first and then cultivate. Go ahead with the next question.
Yeah, say I'm curious what you guys have for population, corn and soybeans, what you're planting.
He was asking population when you seed soybeans or plant corn. What's your population?
I'm in a dryland situation, rain-fed. So corn, I probably plant 21 to 23,000. Soybeans, I'm probably putting on, well, it depends on the seed size and everything, but if you were to dig in the furrow there, I'm probably about a ½ inch between, seeds. So I'm really pouring the soybean seed on. And that's because I know that I'm going to have losses, Some of them aren't going to germinate, and then when I do get to rotary hoeing, I know I'm going to knock a few of them out. But and that's one of the reasons I also like flaming soybeans at the cotyledon stage and corn at an early stage. I'd rather not use a rotary hoe at that time because if the soybeans were in the cotyledon stage, they're so tender, you'll just break them off. Even though you're getting the weeds, you'll lose a lot of your stand that way. And then I couldn't stand to see the little corn plants laying up on top of the surface after I ran through there with the rotary hoe. But again, I was trying to get the little weeds that were in the, you could say, the silver stage when they're just little silver weeds in the soil. But then after the soybeans get a little larger, go to true leaves and so on, then I'm aggressive with the rotary hoe there. And I don't rotary hoe corn at all. I just use the flamer and then cultivation.
In my operation, I guess we're in the land of hog manure and 6 foot of topsoil. We're pushing pops pretty hard. We're fertilizing for 250 plus bushel organic corn. And on my corn, we were playing around 36,000. We're pushing that up to 38,000, knowing that we're going to lose some stand in our tillage and passes and turns and stuff. But soybeans, we started out just trying to keep it similar, conventional. Learned at 140, 150. We're 30-inch row space. I apologize. And been pushing that up to 180, 200,000 on the soybeans just because we're getting more aggressive with the tine weeder at the third trifoliate stage and noticing, we're covering up some beans and tearing out a little bit. But if we can keep that final stand around that 130 to 140,000, we're still seeing, no decrease in yield. And like I said, in the soybean or the corn, we're fertilizing for high yield. So we're pushing our pops up, and we get enough rain to make that work. Typically in north central Iowa. So I guess that's where we're at.
So another question would be, what do you guys' rotations look like?
Typical rotation for me would be corn, oats, soybeans. I like to follow the oats with soybeans. Just it seems like you have a little bit more weed control in that solid stand crop. And I try to see every acre of my organics currently has a cover crop growing on it. So I guess I feel that's critical. But I really like the rotation, the three crop rotation. Oats work well for us. We have grain millers in our area. We have a few more outlets for oats. Oats are always finicky. They're often hard to market, but they're a great crop. I love the fact that you can harvest in July and pattern tile in August. So it's always fun to pattern tile in a t-shirt. So that's why I like oats.
You said to ask about other perennials, aside from rotation, when we're fighting Canada thistle, what have you seen? You're not going to kill them, but what have you seen to knock them back, get some yield out of those patches?
Canada thistle is actually extremely sensitive to flaming. And I do have some organic beef producers in Nebraska. For that, you need to have an organic pasture, which means you cannot use Tordon or Grazon, dicamba or whatever out there. No chemicals. And of course, the invasive species, including Canada thistle, which by the way is a noxious weed. So we do have quite a bit of that in Nebraska, And so the guys are actually, I worked with you guys, they rigged up a little propane tank like the one that you have on the back of the skid loaders or whatever, and they put that on the back of their ATVs. They have a little on single or two nozzle torch, and they'll dry around the pasture and just squirt it, not chemicals, but squirt it with flaming. It takes, we did some dose response on Canada thistle, and it takes as low as 2 to 3 gallons per acre equivalent. So, but it's going to regrow, of course, and that applies for any perennial weeds. You can go, the list can go on and on. You know, I've done it with multiple species, but the Canada thistle is the one that's pretty common throughout the Midwestern region. And so what those guys are doing, they flame it, and then they'll come back a month later. So they do about 3 shots in the season, and that keeps the patch down. And they use it for leafy spurge as well. You know, leafy spurge is another one of those weeds that's out in the pasture. And so anyway, and like I said, the same analogy applies for other perennial weeds. And what you're doing there is actually every time you flame those perennial weeds, by nature or by default, you trigger their secondary growth. You kill the primary growth. The secondary buds that are on the perennial structure, which in this case is a rhizome, which is underground rootstock, you trigger the secondary buds, and then you kill the secondary buds, and they keep shooting those secondary buds. So theoretically speaking, if you do this for X number of years, you can actually deplete the nutrients from the rootstock, and I don't want to say completely control it, but you'll knock the pants off. And again, the key with the weed control for any perennial weed species, regardless of any systems that you're using, except if you are in a tillage situation where by mechanical means you're gonna slice up the rhizomes and whatever, you know, is to be persistent and to keep doing it and try to deplete the nutrients. So if you've been, let's say you bought some pasture that has some perennial weeds in it, and the first question you ask the guy, how long have you been watching this Canada thistle and leafy spurge? He said, 20 years. It'll take you 20 years to get rid of it. You can use, like I said, all the chemicals. I've done research in rangeland and pasture, and all the chemicals are designed to knock off the pants of these weeds for just that particular season, end of the story. Unless you're a salesman for these chemicals and you say, I got a silver bullet. I go to these meetings, they invite me to sit in the back row, and they have the pesticides guys stand up here and talk about new silver bullets, and then I start asking questions, and some of those guys know me now, so they watch what they're saying, but that's the bottom line. You know, for the perennial weed species, the older the stand it is, the older the mother plant is, the more tougher the roots, the crowns, the secondary buds, the tertiary buds that are on it. I mean, some of these I can knock down with chemicals for maybe 2 seasons, 3 seasons, and you think we took care of it. No, it just comes back with vengeance. Thank you.
I'll touch on that too. Very similar. So my flamer, of course, does not have automatic lighters. We have to actually get out and light it with a hand torch on a pilot mode, and I guess I'm comfortable with it. We've been doing it for years, but so we do have a hand torch that comes off the big tank, and I'll actually, if we get into a thistle patch, just like what you're saying, I'll actually get out with a hand torch and just walk around and just burn the living crap out of them. And you're not going to kill them, but they will come back, but you can set them back. But the one thing and the one tool in my toolbox that I absolutely love is when we get into the soybeans or even oats is the weed zapper. In oats, you can't really get to them, but the thistles like to hang out below the canopy, so I built a set of drops on my weed zapper, and we can drop down. If we can at least tickle that thistle, just like a cockabur. Cockaburs are hard to get above the canopy, but if you can get down below the canopy and get it in between the rows before your rows start to fill in, so you're not zapping all your leaves off, it is effective. I've got a picture in here somewhere of a thistle patch that we hit with a weed zapper just along the edge of a field, and it just smoked it. I think it's in there. I'm not for certain, but that's my hail down corn this year. That was fun. July 7th, sitting there watching a hailstorm roll across my farm, and somehow we still pulled off some pretty good yields, but it kicked her back hard. I'm not. It's okay, but like I said, the weed zapper. One more tool in the toolbox. I have a firm believer in zapping on your soybeans, getting that stuff by the canopy. Water hemp. It's just phenomenal what it does to water hemp too. So all these weeds that the chemicals can't seem to kill, we're doing it. I have a cockleburr patch on a field my dad farmed for years and years. He bought that farm in 1984. Always had a cockleburr patch, could never control it, sprayed it and sprayed it and sprayed it. I virtually have that cockleburr patch eradicated now in the last 6 years of farming that organic. So there is merit to this.
A question for the grower panel, and then maybe Steve to answer. Could you talk a little bit more about your recipe for flaming soybeans? Either like your PSI or your speed, just a little bit more detail on how you're setting your flamers. Thanks.
You can flame the beans, like I said, during cotyledon stage, which lasts for about 3, 4, 5 days. It depends how many acres you planted out there. If you planted more acres, maybe not all the beans going to come up at the same time. You start on that end of the field, or you start with the field that you planted earlier, so maybe eventually you'll catch it up. But like I said, you have only about 3, 4 days to flame it. And then after that, you have to go back to...
Can I jump in on that
Sure.
quick? One feedback I've gotten from talking with farmers on that early stage soybeans is borrowing the concept of basically stale seed bedding, like pre-emerge flaming. So vegetable growers, they'll intentionally get weeds to emerge, flame those beds before their vegetables come up. So in early stage soybeans, you plant, monitor germination, and again, this is with probably RTK guidance, the magic of that, you can go in and blind flame over the top of those soybean rows before they emerge, expand that early season window, and get that critical early season control flaming pass done in soybeans.
So So here is the table. You ask for quote-unquote recipe. If you want to out there 4 mile, and this table is in that manual. Like I said, just shoot me an email. If you cannot find me, just type in flame weeding Nebraska. My name will pop up, and you can send me an email. And this table is in the manual. And so if you're out there 4 mile an hour, you have 30. Hold on, did I click this? And then you go, either 30 to 50 PSI. There's your rates that you're using. So if you're, let's say, banding, so that means you're using about half as much. So then you go 30 PSI, you're using about 6 gallons or somewhere around 6 gallons. And then if you're broadcasting, then you push that PSI up to 50 PSI, and then that will give you about 10 gallons for the broadcast. So that would be the recipe, in terms of how fast, what's the PSI. And then after cotyledon stage, what was said, after that, maybe you'll have to go in and do some, interrow cultivation or rotary hose, and then wait until those beans get up to about that V3, I would say V4 stage. Depends on the varieties. Some varieties are shorter, bushier. Some are a little bit taller, skinner, thinner, whatever the term is anyway. And then maybe those you can do a V3. But again, one thing if you guys want to remember from today's presentations from all of us is this. Keep in mind, where is the growing point of the plant, either a weed or the crop, relative to the timing of your flaming. Because flame and the heat will kill or drastically damage growing point, and I call it a kiss of death. So just keep that in mind, especially for soybeans and sunflower. The grassy type crops, if you look at that corn, the growing point of corn is right at the soil surface at about a V6 stage, V6, V7 stage. And that would be 7 leaves. You're looking at that corn, you can count the leaves from the bottom, the thumb leaf, and you go up and you have 7 fully extended leaves and probably another 2 or 3 in the world. You cut that on the base. I've done it many times as part of the teaching and demonstration, and then I use a knife and I cut the stem vertically, and I start peeling all these leaf sheets that are around the growing point. And there's like 10 of those. That's why that corn and sorghum and any type of corn, popcorn, sweet corn, field corn, is pretty tolerant to that heat, because the heat needs to go through 10 layers of plant tissue to hurt the growing point. I don't want to say you cannot kill corn with flaming, but it's really hard to damage it that badly.
Unfortunately, our time has extinguished, and I need to snuff out the conversation here. But the good news is that before we all go to lunch, please join me in thanking all the speakers today.